Welcome to Cattle Call, an original production of the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. I'm Chad Moyer. Cattle Call is brought to you by Wolf Auto, small town strong. Check out their website, inventory, all the details at wolfauto.com. Joining me on today's program, once again, it's Brad Kooima from Kooima Varilek there at Sioux Center, Iowa. Brad, thanks for taking the time and visiting with us. I don't know if you call it fortunately or unfortunately, probably in this case, unfortunately, we have two sessions of cattle trade to talk about, where we ended last week, and we've already seen some cash trade take place this week. Kind of quickly summarize what took us from last week to this week.
Yes. Well, it feels like, thanks for having me on, first of all. It feels like it's night and day. We went home last Friday, I think, feeling somewhat optimistic that cash was going to be better. We saw the standoff in the country, where Packer was trying to buy cattle at 230. Everybody was asking 235. Very few cattle traded. The South did trade a few cattle as high as 237 late in the week last week. Very, very light trade, if any at all, here in the North. So we came in this week hoping that, okay, we got the Packer, used up some inventory. We're going to have some leverage. We're going to get them to, bid up here for the cattle. Unfortunately, the futures collapsed, and that changes psychology. That influences, if you're a hedger, you'll take less money because of the basis. And so, yeah, 232 in the South, 5 lower, and not a lot of trade that way, but some 7,000 or so in Kansas. Trade yesterday here, maybe a little bit of 28, 27, and as bad as 225, which is significantly lower than last week, and largely influenced, Chad, by a steep sell-off in both the feeders and the fans. Yeah.
Could you talk about that, especially what we've seen this week? Because I have noticed the numbers that came out on the dress trade. You've got, I think it was another 18,000 or so here in Nebraska supposedly traded, and like amount in Iowa. But I noticed it was a very wide range on a dressed basis. Is that common for this type of market move, or is there something at play here that might have influenced that a little bit?
Great. I'm guessing that probably, it's a good question, and it is unusual. I think that the main reason probably, Chad, was timing. Yesterday morning, for instance, early, for a little while, the bids looked like they were going to be steady-ish, 230 to 231, and then the board collapsed, and all of a sudden it's either I got no bid or I'll try to steal them for this. 362 went to 360, went to 355. So my guess is that it probably was timing, and the later the day wore on, the worse the bids got as the Packers, used his opportunity to scare. I don't know if that's the right word, but he is able to buy cattle lower because of the panic created by the weaker futures market.
Sure. All right. Well, let's kind of go down that road too, and talk a little bit about the dynamics. Where cash cattle sit for the producer, for the farmer feeder, but also on the packer side, because there's quite a long time this year where at least the numbers that were kind of common in the business said packers were losing a fair amount of money. Is that still the case, or have things flipped there a little bit, Brad?
I think you bring up a great point, Chad, and one that maybe stands developing on just a little bit. That's exactly what happened. We changed that a lot here just in the last couple of weeks. So Trump's announcement has made it so that the packer can make some money. How about that? By the way, box beef is actually higher now this morning than it was when this stuff started. With this, we think beef's a little too high, and we got to help the consumer out by bringing it down. Boxes are higher than when this thing started. Okay, everybody hear that? I think the market's more like a pie. For a long time, it was somebody that's a producer. We hope we get a little slice of that pie, right? The packer gets a chunk of it, the wholesaler gets a chunk of it, the retailer gets a chunk of it, that pie. And for the most part, the producer, the cow-calf guy, sometimes we don't even get a piece of that pie. Sometimes we're adding to it, because I've had plenty of times where I've fed cattle that lost money. Okay, all of a sudden, this dynamic changed for quite a while, and we were getting our turn. We, meaning where it's a cow-calf guy or the feeder, the guy that owned the cattle, the guy that's assumed all the risk. And we were getting a nice big chunk of the pie. Who's kidding who? And the packer was losing money. Well, that's just kind of the way the cyclical nature of the market is when there's not enough to go around. Okay. So, but what's changed here in the last little while, as you pointed out, is that the boxes have been relatively stable, actually improved here a little bit, as we still can seem to have really good domestic demand. And by the way, maybe the I've been referring to the Mexican border as kind of the gorilla in the closet, the waiting for the bad news to come out. This China thing is potentially the opposite of that. They've indicated they're maybe going to roll back their retaliatory tariffs. Now, they're not reliable. You can't always take them at their word. Okay. But that could be a little bit of a diamond in the rough here, or whatever you want to call it. Where if they start buying some of our beef again, and they at one time were a huge customer for us, that might make a difference. But to your point, you got a packer now that's buying on a dress basis cattle probably at 355. You got a box at 378. It works for him. Now the next thing might be, it's 2 weeks from Thanksgiving only. Now the next thing might be, which I'm hoping for, is that you'll see the packer increase his kill, take advantage of his good margins, and that ought to stabilize the cash market as well.
Okay, let's get into a listener question that we had here this week. And this one has to do with some of those headlines that you were talking about, or some of the fears in the market, and kind of where this North American cattle business is right now. We can go ahead and put that up on the screen. The question that we had is basically, where do these cattle sit that are in Mexico? Do you think Mexico has fat cattle with the time and the corn that they've bought? Are they able to immediately move these cattle in if there would be an announcement? You talk a little bit about some of the medications that were approved to take to combat this New World screwworm. How does that all play in? What's the feasibility of those Mexican cattle immediately coming into the United States?
It's an insightful question. It's one that I've batted around a little bit. It's funny, commodity broker, what the market trades is what you finally have to dig into. I find myself feeling like I know more about the treatment of screwworm and the movement of screwworm than I ever cared to know. So I've tried. I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not a scientist. I'm not just a dumb commodity broker, right? Farmer. However, I have talked to a number of people that are in the business of exporting cattle and what protocols necessary to safely do that. And you're getting one person's opinion, just my opinion. But from talking to some of these guys, I believe that there is actually protocol in place that some of the states, particularly Sonora, Mexico, which is a state directly south of Arizona, have had in place for a long time, where they treat them with Ivamec several days before they go to the border, get inspected a couple of times, then go through a dip deal where they redone, like a redundant thing. That it seems to me like there would be a zero chance that the larvae would survive that. Either they Ivamec and Dectomax, as your question is, those have both been approved for the treatment of screwworm. So now this guy's specific question, or person's specific question about, of course, there's fat cattle in Mexico. There's cattle that have been slaughtered, several months worth of cattle. Do I think that beef is getting to the United States? Yes, in the form of boxes, etc. Now, if the border would open, I think the guy's question is, if the border would open like soon, would you get a bunch of big fat cattle? I would guess from talking down there, Mike, and I would guess that probably not. My guess is that, those cattle have found a home. They've been in this feedlot for a long time. Typically, that wouldn't be the kind of thing that you'd want to transfer anyway. That would be more likely that you'd see it mostly this 5, 6, 7 week steer. Typically, in the old days, it was always this 5-weight cattle, Chad, the 5, even the 4-weight calves. But that may have changed. But I'm going to have to do a little digging on that, because that would be if you had a packing house in Texas, that would be a little intriguing. That would be a way to fund that, because I know I've got, yes, there's cattle that we sold last week that are going exported from Northwest Iowa to Texas to die this week, and they're paying the freight. So I mean, it's the supply of cattle in that area is extremely tight. So yeah, desperate times calls for weird measures, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's one of those weird times where the farmer isn't paying the freight both ways, huh?
I've never seen anything like it. And one thing people are going to not like this statement, but so we're sharply lower again as we're doing this program, and maybe by the time it airs, the market will have turned. That's as volatile as it is. Okay. But this is what you're not going to like. I think the market probably got too high. Okay. That's what futures market do. That's what it does. Lumber at 1,700 is probably too high, right? Orange juice at $4.60. Okay, I mean, the corn at $8. Sorry, I mean, and so then you don't know where that is. But the trouble with that is the markets, futures markets, an emotional market, so it also goes too low. So are we too low for the fundamentals that we have? I would say probably, because even if the border opens tomorrow, Chad, they're not going to change the supply of cattle appreciably for the first quarter of the year or to finish the last quarter of this year. Does Brazil tariffs roll back? Does that mean there's going to be more grinding meat come in? Might cheapen hamburger up a little bit at the retail counter? Yeah, it should. Does that affect what live cattle are worth, though? It seems to me those are two different things. So I wonder if we aren't in that, okay, now we're getting a little crazy down here. I hope by the time we do this next week, we can look back and say, okay, it looks like we've stabilized now. But I think it's going to have to start with the cash market stabilizing, and that might have to be with a packer that's willing to kill a few more and pay a little bit more.
Sure. All right. Getting close to the end of our program here for this week, I guess, what are the, like we say, we've had kind of a trade here in the north. We're kind of waiting on the south. I guess, what are the keys for you? What are we going to be kind of watching as it relates to our risk management plan here over the next few weeks?
I wish they would just give us the news. Give us the news. Tell us that you're going to take the 50% tariff off of Brazil. Fine. It's in the market. Everybody seems to know that that's going to happen. Okay, let's get it out of the way, so that these headline algorithms can deal with it and get it into thing. As far as the Mexican border is, why not give us a day and say, okay, you know what? Depending something changing, we're going to open a January 1. Cold weather along with Dectomex and ivermectin are the two things that stop the larvae. Okay, so I don't know. I would enough innuendo, enough threats. And let's just get back to the news here, I think. So I would love that. But in the meanwhile, you and I I've been preaching to be careful up here since you and I started this thing, Chad. So I hope that some have listened. And now we're at a spot in the market where now it's like, okay, now put the clutch in, pump the brakes. I don't think you got to go press the sell side down here after this big up a break. So.
All right. Well, we'll continue to watch these storylines and others. We'll be back with another Cattle Call program next week. In the meantime, if folks want to reach out, Brad, how can they do that?
The website's kkvtrading.com, but we'd rather have you call 712-722-0023.
Always good to have you on the program. Thank you so much, Brad Kooima and Varilek there at Sioux Center, Iowa. And if you have a question that you'd like Brad and I to talk about, be sure and put that in the comments while you're down there. Click that subscribe button, the notification button, and that'll let you know when the next Cattle Call program comes out. We do this every week. Great conversation with Brad once again here this week. Thanks for joining us on today's Cattle Call. Again, an original production of the Nebraska Rural Radio Association, brought to you by Wolf Auto, small town strong. Have a great week. We'll see you next week on Cattle Call.